In a world of cold, polished surfaces, the fire of rebellion is the only thing that can break the mirror of deception. Join us as we tell the stories of those who dared to defy the system and rewrite their own future. Hit subscribe now and join the cinematic revolution today.
The night my mother almost didn't make it home started with a broken elevator and the stranger who grabbed my sleeve. We weren't supposed to be at Mercy General that late. My mother's follow-up appointment had been scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. But her cardiologist was running behind, then behind some more, and by the time we finally walked out of the cardiology wing, it was past 8 o'clock and the building was nearly empty. Most of the administrative staff had gone home. The gift shop was locked. The main lobby, which during the day buzzed with volunteers in pink vests and families clutching flower arrangements, had gone quiet in a way that felt less peaceful and more like something had been removed from it. My mother was 63 and had been recovering from a procedure on a heart valve for 6 weeks. She wasn't frail, exactly. She'd spent 30 years as a school cafeteria manager and had the kind of stubborn physical toughness that comes from standing on your feet all day. But she tired easily now, and her balance wasn't what it used to be. I held her arm as we walked, adjusting my pace to hers, trying not to make it obvious that I was doing it. "You don't have to hold me like I'm made of glass," she said. "I'm not. I'm cold. You're warm." She laughed. That was one thing about my mother. She always laughed. That was one thing about my mother. She always laughed. The parking structure was connected to the hospital on the 3rd floor via an enclosed walkway. We parked on level 3 specifically because of that connection, because I didn't want her navigating stairs or open-air ramps in the dark. The elevator from the cardiology wing to the walkway level was one of 2 bank units near the east stairwell, and when we pressed the button, one of them dinged immediately. But when the doors opened, there was a paper sign taped inside. Handwritten. "Out of Servid. Please use C stairwell or west elevator." My mother looked at the sign and then looked at me. "West elevators all the way back past radiology," I said. "That's a 10-minute walk." "Stairs?" she offered. "1 flight." I looked at the stairwell door. "You okay with 1 flight? I climbed stairs for 30 years carrying trays of food. I think I can manage 1 flight." We pushed through the stairwell door. The air inside was cooler than the hallway, and the fluorescent lights flickered slightly in that institutional way that makes you feel like you're in a movie you didn't agree to be in. My mother took the railing. I stayed half a step behind her. We made it down fine. We pushed through the door on the 2nd floor, walked through the short connector corridor, and came out into the hospital's main ground-level lobby. That's when I saw them. There were 2 men near the west entrance, not sitting, not standing in line, not looking at phones. They were positioned, that's the only word I can use, positioned near the automatic doors, 1 on each side, in the way that people stand when they're watching for someone specific, rather than waiting for anyone in general. Both wore dark clothing. One of them had a hood up despite being inside. I noticed them. Then I told myself I was being paranoid. Then I noticed them again. My mother hadn't seen them yet. She was focused on not slipping on the lobby's polished floor, which was slightly wet near the entrance from the rain that had started outside. "The car's in the structure," I said, keeping my voice level. "We need to go up 1 level. Through the walkway. The walkway entrance was across the lobby, past a row of chairs and a water fountain, through a set of glass doors. To get there, we would have to walk through the lobby, past the men. I slowed slightly, adjusting my grip on my mother's arm. One of the men near the entrance looked up. His eyes moved across the lobby, and for a moment they rested on us. Not on me. On my mother. Like he was checking something. I've thought about that look many times since. It was the kind of look that doesn't belong in a hospital lobby. "Let's stop at the water fountain," I said. I had no reason to say it. My mother didn't need water. But I needed to slow down without it being obvious that I was slowing down. My mother looked at me. "I'm not thirsty. I am." She gave me the look she's been giving me since I was 11, the one that says, "I know you're not telling me something." But she went along with it. I bent over the fountain and drank nothing while watching the men in my peripheral vision. The one without the hood said something to the other, low and quick. The other one nodded. I straightened up. "Okay," I said. Excuse me." The voice came from behind me and to the left. I turned. A woman in light blue scrubs was standing near the nursing station counter that bordered the lobby. She was maybe 45, with dark hair pulled back and the particular tired competence of someone who had been on her feet for 12 hours and was now on hour 13. Her name badge said Patient Service, and below that a name I couldn't read from where I stood. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at my mother. "Are you two going to the parking structure?" she asked. Something in her voice was careful. Not nervous. Careful. Like someone choosing words precisely. "We are," I said. She stepped around the counter, moving toward us with a naturalness that should have looked casual and didn't quite. She kept her body angled toward us and away from the men by the door. "The walkway's being mopped," she said. "Both sides, actually. There was a spill earlier. Security closed it about 20 minutes ago." She paused. "But if you need to get to the structure, there's a staff route through the back of the building. It comes out on the ramp side." My mother started to say something about the regular entrance being fine, and I said, "That would be really helpful. Thank you." The woman looked at me. Not my mother. Me. And in that look was something I still can't fully describe. A kind of deliberate steadiness, like she was making sure I understood that this mattered. "Follow me," she said. She walked toward the east corridor, away from the lobby, away from the men by the door. My mother and I followed. The east corridor was longer than I expected. It had the feel of a part of the building that visitors weren't usually meant to see. Supply closets with rolling carts parked outside, a maintenance board with color-coded work orders, ceiling tiles with visible repair patches. The lights here were the older kind, warmer and a little uneven. "How long has the walkway been closed?" my mother asked. "Just this evening," the woman said. She didn't elaborate. I kept moving. I kept my hand on my mother's arm, and I kept thinking about the man's eyes in the lobby, the specific quality of that glance, the way it had landed on my mother and held there for half a second before moving on. My mother had won a slip-and-fall settlement 11 months ago, $42,000. She'd mentioned it, carefully, privately, to a small number of people, because she'd been trying to decide whether to use the money to help my brother with his down payment or invest it for her retirement. She was cautious about money. She'd grown up with nothing, and she handled every dollar like it had her name on it. But somebody knew. I don't know how. People talk. Her neighbor's nephew had done some of the legal paperwork. There were ways for things to get out, and once something is out, it travels in directions you can't track. I hadn't connected any of this until that corridor. Until I was walking away from those men and the pieces were starting to arrange themselves in a way I didn't like. "Almost there," the woman said. We turned a corner and came into a wider service corridor with a heavy push-bar door at the end. Above the door, a small metal sign read, "Parking Sturster, Staff ACCs." Through the narrow vertical window in the door, I could see the concrete of the ramp. She pushed the door open and held it. I guided my mother through first, then turned back. "The walkway," I said. "Was it really closed?" She looked at me for a moment. The corridor behind her was empty. "There were 2 gentlemen in the lobby," she said, "who have been there for about 40 minutes. They're not patients. They're not visitors with anyone admitted. They've told security twice that they're waiting for a friend, but no one can identify who that friend is." She paused. "Security is handling it, but I thought it was better not to." She glanced toward my mother, who had moved a few steps ahead onto the ramp, not to let the situation develop. I felt something loosen in my chest, the particular relief of understanding and fear arriving simultaneously. "Did you call the police?" I asked. "Security did, about 10 minutes ago." A brief professional pause. "You should get to your car and drive straight home. Don't stop in the structure. If anything looks wrong, don't stop. Go to the attendant booth on the ground level and stay there." "Okay," I said. "Okay, park closer to the entrance next time," she said. "Any parking structure, any hospital, any hour past 6, closer to the attendant." "Okay, okay." She let the door close between us. I caught up with my mother on the ramp. She'd been watching me. "What did she say to you?" my mother asked. "She said to have a good night." My mother looked at me the way she always looks at me when I'm not telling her the full truth. With patience, not accusation, like she's willing to wait until I'm ready. We found our car on level 3. I checked the back seat before my mother got in. I drove to the exit ramp and stopped briefly at the attendant booth. The attendant, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a foam cup of coffee, waved us through. He had a radio on his belt. I didn't say anything to my mother on the drive home. The rain came down and the highway was quiet, and I kept the radio on low, some oldies station playing songs from the 70s that she half sang along to without seeming to notice she was doing it. She fell asleep about 20 minutes from her house. The way she always does on drives, chin dropping slowly, one hand still resting on her purse in her lap. I kept both hands on the wheel and watched the road. 3 days later, I called the hospital. I asked for patient services in the main lobby and gave the approximate shift and description. The woman who answered told me that the name I was describing, and I described her by her build and her badge and her shift, sounded like it might be a staff member who had recently transferred to day rotation, but she couldn't confirm specifics about employees. I asked if there had been any incident reported in the lobby the evening of my mother's appointment. A pause. "I can't confirm or deny incident reports," the woman said. "But if you experience something concerning, you're welcome to fill out a visitor feedback form and it will be reviewed by our safety coordinator." I thanked her and hung up. I never found out the woman's name. I don't know what happened to the 2 men in the lobby. I don't know if they were who I think they were, or if my mother was who they were looking for, or if I am filling in a story from fragments that might have an entirely different explanation. What I know is that a woman I'd never met looked at a situation and decided that someone needed to walk us out of it without making it a scene, without frightening an elderly woman recovering from heart surgery, without the kind of drama that would have made everything worse. She handled it quietly and professionally, and I don't know her name, and she will probably never know that I still think about her. I told my mother eventually, about 3 weeks later, at dinner, after she was stronger and the follow-up results had come back clean and there was some distance between that night and us. I kept the details simple. I told her there were some men in the lobby whose security was keeping an eye on, and a woman on staff had taken us out a different way as a precaution. My mother set down her fork. She thought about it. Then she said, "I thought you were being strange about that water fountain." I was being strange about the water fountain. I knew it. She picked her fork back up. I'd expected her to be frightened or upset or angry. Instead, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "That was a good woman. I hope someone does that for her someday, when she needs it." That's my mother, 63 years old, 6 weeks out from heart surgery, nearly walked into something neither of us wants to name, and the first thing she thinks about is the woman who helped us, hoping someone will return the favor. I don't have a tidy conclusion. I don't have an answer for why that particular evening, why my mother, whether anything would have actually happened, or whether I've built a theory around a coincidence. I have a woman in blue scrubs who knew something was wrong before I did, and who acted without being asked, and who asked for nothing in return. I moved my mother closer to my neighborhood 6 weeks after that night. She has a smaller apartment now, 10 minutes from my house, and she calls me when she gets home from anywhere after dark, and I call her when she doesn't. Some things change quietly without announcement because one evening shifted something in how you understand the world and the people who move through it alongside you without your ever knowing their names. I've replayed that night more times than I can count, and the thing that stays with me isn't the fear. It's how close we came to walking straight into it without ever knowing. The woman in the blue scrubs didn't have to do anything. That's the part I keep coming back to. Her shift was almost over. My mother and I were strangers. Whatever was unfolding in that lobby wasn't technically her problem, and she could have stood behind that counter and watched us walk past and told herself it probably wasn't anything serious. Most people do exactly that. Not because they're bad people, but because getting involved is inconvenient and uncertainty gives us permission to look away. She didn't look away. She paid attention when it would have been easier not to, and then she acted on what she saw. Quietly, without making it a spectacle, without frightening my mother, without asking for anything in return. That's not a small thing. That's actually a rare thing. And I think it's rare because it requires all three of something that most of us only have in pieces. It requires the decency to care about someone you've never met, the kind of moral compass that doesn't need a personal stake in the outcome to point in the right direction. My mother was nothing to her. We were two more visitors in a building that sees hundreds of people every single day, and yet she looked at us, really looked, and decided that our safety mattered. It requires the clarity to read a situation correctly and act on that reading without the luxury of certainty. She didn't know for sure what those men intended. She only knew what she observed, and she trusted her own judgment enough to do something about it. That kind of clear-eyed thinking, the ability to move through uncertainty without being paralyzed by it, that's something I've had to practice. I'm still practicing it. That night reminded me how much it matters. And it requires the steadiness to follow through without wavering. She didn't alert us and then step back. She walked us out herself, door to door, and she made sure I understood what to do next. That takes a quiet kind of courage that doesn't look dramatic from the outside but feels enormous when you're on the receiving end of it. My mother said she hoped someone would do the same for that woman someday. I think about that a lot. I think the way the world actually works, not in any mystical sense, just in the plain, observable sense, is that the things we extend to strangers tend to come back around. Not always to us directly, not always soon, but the people who pay attention, who act on what they see, who follow through even when it costs them something, those people tend to move through the world surrounded by others who do the same. I want to be that kind of person for someone else someday. I don't know when or for whom, but I want to be awake enough to notice, clear enough to act, and steady enough to walk them all the way to the door. That's what she gave me, along with my mother's safety. A standard to try to live up to.